Hey, thanks for staying with us. Welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. Russian forces suffered a setback in the southern Kherson region after Ukrainian forces struck an important bridge straddling the Dnipro River with what a Russian-appointed local administrator said were U.S.-supplied high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS. Footage posted on social media showed at least 6 large holes in its surface. Deputy head of the Russian-appointed city administration, Kirill Stremusov, said the Antonisky Bridge is the city of Kherson's sole span across the river, and it was closed to traffic after the strike. He said Russia was ready to compensate for it being taken out of action with pontoon bridges and ferries. Ukraine has spoken of launching a major counteroffensive in the south of the country to try to retake cities such as Kherson, rendering the bridge unusable for Russian forces as seen by Western military analysts as something that would make it much harder for Moscow's forces to operate smooth supply lines and defend land they have seized since February 24. Well, the Russian-appointed official there denied the fate of the bridge would determine the course of the war in any way. In the meantime, the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Oleg Nikolenko says Russia's efforts to absorb Ukrainian territories are null and void. He says it will be totally untrue if residents in Russian-occupied Zaporizhia and Kherson were to vote in a referendum that could happen in September. Ukraine would regard a referendum held in occupied territories about joining Russia as a reason for the international community to introduce more sanctions against Russia and send more weapons to Ukraine.
The Russian Federation is trying to absorb the territories it occupied in Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. They are trying to set up occupation administrations and also to simplify the procedure for obtaining Russian citizenship. They are doing it to stage the so-called referendum. According to the statements, it might happen in September, in order to justify the occupation and pretend that those territories voluntarily decided to join Russia, which is totally untrue. We see that the demand for Russian passports among the local population is very low. People living in Kherson region stand against the occupation. They are not joining schools, local administrations, police forces. So that's why Russians have to bring their citizens from Russia to fill in positions in the local administrations. As you know, the territories that Russia seized are closed. Ukrainian government is not able to deliver any humanitarian aid to those territories. So that's why they are creating conditions for people so that in order to receive humanitarian aid from Russian occupation administration, people have to have Russian citizenship. So that's why we see this. There are some cases, but it's not something that is mainstream among the local population.
Look at the farmers gathering the harvest at the height of the season following the signing of the deal in Istanbul, Turkey, allowing Ukraine to export grains from the Black Sea ports. Reports say they're working, as those farmers are working under constant threat of shelling and resulting blazes as Russian and Ukrainian forces exchange fire daily. These farmers are in the village of Muskivka in Kherson, said to be going to the fields at their own risk, as there is a possibility of shelling, and they're closer to the Mykolaiv region where it's impossible to harvest. But they try to harvest what remains of their fields. There's also a lack of staff, they say, as the entire working-age population left. Ukraine has accused Russia of stealing grain from territories that Russia has seized since President Putin sent in his army into the country on February 24. Moscow, of course, denies this. But Ukraine, a major grain exporter, has been unable to ship its cereals via the Black Sea because of a Russian blockade of its ports. The two countries signed agreements in Istanbul last week aimed at resuming shipments to help stave off a global food crisis. Today, Turkish Foreign Minister Hulusi Akar unveiled a center in Istanbul to oversee the export of Ukrainian grains after that landmark deal signed last week, with the first shipment expected to depart from the Black Sea ports within days. The Joint Coordination Center in Istanbul will oversee departures from 3 Ukrainian ports in which ships must circumvent mines and will conduct inspections of incoming ships for weapons. All vessels pass through Turkish waters, and all parties will appoint representatives at the JCC to monitor the implementation of the plan. A total of 20 personnel from Ukraine, Russia, Turkey and the UN will work side by side at the center. Speaking earlier at the National Defense University in central Istanbul's Levant district, where the JCC is located, Mr. Akar said more than 25 million tons of grain was waiting to be exported. Head of the UN delegation at the Istanbul Joint Coordination Center, Fred Kenny, is also part of the team overseeing the grain export deal between Russia and Ukraine. He said today it is crucial that the agreement succeeds in order to ensure global food security, and that safety and safe navigation of merchant vessels is a key consideration.
We believe that it's critical to ensuring global food security, so yes, we need to succeed. Well, that's certainly the primary consideration in this initiative is to ensure the safety and safe navigation of merchant vessels. So, of course, all of those considerations will be taken into account.
The VOA's Anna Chernikova joins us now from Kyiv. Anna, great to see you. Has the Ukrainian government said how soon it can begin to export grains?
Good evening. Well, Ukrainian government is ready, and the Ukrainian government, particularly Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine, announced a couple of days ago that actually the ports, 3 ports that were confirmed in the agreement between Ukraine with Turkey and UN and Russia with Turkey and UN, that these ports are reopening. And today it was a report that they actually are open, and that the grain is ready to be exported soon. Basically, the coordination committee, the Joint Coordination Center, started it. So it was yesterday. It started its operation, and this is a sign that certain, procedures are in action to actually start this export. So from Ukrainian authorities, we received confirmation that Ukrainian grain should soon be exported, and actually it would be quite a lot of grain, and it will be a certain corridor and certain caravan, which is, the way how it's going to be exported through the waters of the international waters and from the Ukrainian territory. So there is hope that nothing extraordinary happens, and this would start sometime soon. We don't have details, and the Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine highlighted that not, particular details would be provided due to security reasons. But again, Ukrainian authorities hope that Russian forces would not, do something that happened just less than 24 hours after the signing of grain deal, and as you know, it was an attack on one of the Odessa ports. So Ukrainian authorities just hope that there's not going to be another case. So we will see, but everyone has a lot of hope that the grain would be out.
Indeed, hopes and expectations are high at this point. But what about production for export? Some of the farmers are saying they're fearful of going out there to the fields, also complaining there's no workforce. Many have left many of the cities because of the war. So how much grain is Ukraine able to produce for export?
Well, this year, so the grain that should be exported this year, it's quite enough and quite a lot. I mean, it's under the plans. So basically, the only problem is to actually export it out from Ukraine. Another question is how much would be possible to harvest this year, and this would be another problem for the next year export. What we know for the moment that, of course, Ukrainian farmers are doing a great job risking their lives. And unfortunately, there are some casualties already within Ukrainian farmers who actually take care of the fields and try to ensure that harvest would be done and it would be what to harvest, because a lot of fields in Kherson region, in Zaporizhia region, and in other areas of Ukraine, because of course south is the most, let's say, the main area for grain production, but also in the east there are a lot of fields, and in other parts of Ukraine as well. So a huge job and very difficult job is going on, and Ukrainian farmers, they understand that a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of grain would be lost and already lost, as we see from the footages of fields which are on fire, and Ukrainian rescue teams and farmers themselves are trying to stop the fire to save as much as it is possible. So for this year, if there is an opportunity for the logistical opportunity to actually export grain, it should be almost according to the plan, because of course, as was confirmed by Ukrainian officials, and also the satellite footages provided by Maxar, a lot of grain unfortunately was stolen from Ukraine, and of course the numbers of grain that was ready for export is less, but still everything which is in the storages on the Ukrainian-controlled vessels or Ukrainian-controlled territory would be ready for the export.
What about the weather? Has that had any impact, on the storage of the grains? Europe currently is going through a heat wave that is going across the continent. So temperatures are sweltering. I don't know what it's like in Ukraine, as we speak. Never really thought about it. But has the weather had any impact on the storage of grains?
Surprisingly, but this year the weather is very comfortable in Ukraine. I should say that, at least for the moment, it was not, an unexpected or too high heat. So normally Ukraine is already quite, hot in this period, but for the moment we still have very comfortable conditions, and also both for people and for farming. So it's not too much rain, it's not too high heat. So in these terms, for the moment, again, Ukraine is not suffering from the problems that Europe is suffering, a lot of European countries. So we'll see. Hopefully the weather would be on the Ukrainian side in this term.
Yeah, and the Russian government is saying that there are obstacles to Russia also exporting grains from the Black Sea port. What sort of obstacles is Russia talking about?
Well, it's difficult, to be sure, because of course it's better probably to ask Russia what do they mean. But I think that probably, and this comes from the negotiations that were taking place, that Russian side were trying to arrange their military control of the grain export. But as far as we know, the military control of the export would be done by the Turkish side, by the Turkish Ministry of Defense, and Russian representatives and Ukrainian representatives would be also present, but they would basically control that from administrative position. Of course, Ukrainian military would control the Ukrainian ports, but Russian military would not be allowed. So I don't know. Maybe they mean that they expect certain actions from the Ukrainian armed forces or whatever, but Ukrainian president and Ukrainian government and all the representatives responsible for this deal are ensuring, and I guess this is quite, it's easy to believe that Ukraine is very, very interested in grain to be exported. So I don't think that Ukraine would do any, provocations or anything like that. So probably this is what Russia is trying to, say. But again, it's difficult, of course, to predict what exactly they mean.
Indeed. Anna, thank you so much for speaking with us, and do stay safe in Kyiv.
Thank you.
Well, to other developments out of the Russian-Ukraine invasion, the United Nations is worried the invasion would lead to many women and girls being trafficked and exploited as they flee the fighting, and it wants special attention on them in any peace or rebuilding efforts in the country. Speaking virtually at the second edition of the Summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen, organized by the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, in the capital Kyiv, UN Deputy Secretary General Mrs. Amina Mohammed asked the international community to step up support in this regard. On the 150th day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the First Lady of Ukraine is hosting the second summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen in Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, to draw the world's attention to the consequences of the war on children and women.
Strength and resilience for the possible.
Renowned British television talk show host Piers Morgan and Ukrainian TV news anchor Hannah Homonai are compares for the event.
Thank you for having me here. It's a great privilege. The First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska.
Holding across 5 cities in Europe and the United States of America, the hybrid event is the brainchild of the wife of the President of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, who is joined by at least 21 First Ladies across the world, including the wife of U.S. President Jill Biden.
Honor the memory of all the Ukrainians, children and adults, military.
A moment of silence for victims of Russia's invasion of her country marks the start of her call to rally support for Ukraine.
Thank you. No matter the suffering, we will be able to do everything in order for the child's smiles and happiness and calm and tranquility to stay in our life. And we are inviting everyone, all those who support the victory over brutality, to join us.
America's First Lady, Jill Biden, who days ago had hosted Ms. Zelenska, added her voice to strengthen the international community's resolve to help women and children.
Through our humanitarian assistance, we are working to address the devastating physical and mental impact of this war. This includes increased access to primary and trauma medical care, food, clean water, and accessible shelter, as well as support to survivors of gender-based violence. The United States remains steadfast in our support for Ukraine.
The President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky.
Attending the summit in person, the President of Ukraine, in his usual defiant demeanor, insists that his country will not break.
The war will not make us hostages of those brutality actions committed by the occupying forces on the territory of our brave and peaceful country. Why are we talking about rebuilding now when we're still at war? We're doing so that on the very first day of the peace we would be able to feel it comprehensively, so that there would be a systemic rebuilding, reconstruction of everything that was destroyed by the Russian army.
5 panel sessions discussed various efforts to rebuild Ukraine as the United Nations makes a case for the care of women and girls.
When forced to flee, women face the risk of trafficking and sexual exploitation. It is crucial that the international community steps up to support Ukrainian women and girls and provides them with the protection that they need.
Former British footballer and UNICEF ambassador David Beckham is among the dignitaries that joined the event virtually. In an emotion-laden voice, the father of 4 sympathizes with children in Ukraine.
I cannot imagine what the Ukrainian people have gone through these past 5 months. But I do know, through my experiences with UNICEF, that getting back to routines through education and learning is a great healer for many children.
The summit also provided an opportunity to raise funds for humanitarian assistance now and in the immediate future for Ukraine. A total of $3.2 million was realized for the reanimation medical vehicles, which the First Lady hopes to use for the funding of at least 32 ambulances to be deployed to the most affected areas of Ukraine.
We'll have more on developments out of the Russia-Ukraine war, but also coming up after the break. U.S. President Joe Biden set to discuss Taiwan and the Russian invasion with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Thursday. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we've rarely seen them together since the war in Ukraine started, but a recent interview by British broadcaster Piers Morgan on his show Uncensored gives us a look into the lives of the Ukraine's president Volodymyr Zelensky and his wife, First Lady Olena Zelenska. In the light-hearted conversation, Ms. Zelenska revealed that she found out her husband would be running for president on TV. A couple laughed while recounting how he forgot to tell Olena he put himself forward for the top job and that she found out during a TV address on New Year's Eve.
I believe this would be a great signal, a big signal. Everyone sees Ukraine's attitude towards the US. This would be the highest support. And we had huge support from the side of the First Lady. She met with Olena here, and it was the correct visit. Very, I would say, unexpected. I would say we were waiting for it a lot, but we didn't expect it to happen. There are very important things. Then the trip. Olena will not say it for herself, I can say it. That was a very important moment. She did a great job, and her efforts really worked. There are quick decisions from the Congress and the White House that emerged after her speech and her visit, and these are very important things. And, of course, the visit of President Biden to Ukraine would be the strongest signal which can be given in support of Ukraine.
I had to apologize. Should have heard the couple talking about when they found out, when she, the First Lady, found out that her husband would be running for office. Two other developments from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Gas prices have soared today after Russia further cut gas supplies to Germany and other Central European countries following its threat this week. European gas prices are said to be up almost 2%, trading above an earlier all-time high since the invasion. There's more in this report.
The wealthy Bavarian city of Augsburg is eerily dark and quiet at night this summer. The facade of the historic buildings in the center are not illuminated. The street lights are dimmed, and most of the fountains are not operating. The city is one of many around Germany to have rolled out a raft of energy savings measures to cut down costs, to set an example to society, and contribute to a nationwide campaign to save gas so the country has enough to get it through the winter. Around Europe, countries are looking for ways to cut energy consumption and fill up their gas stores in response to lower Russian gas deliveries in the wake of the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine and in preparation for a possible total cutoff. In France, government task forces are meeting to address the issue, while Italy's government has mandated dialing down air conditioning and heating systems in public buildings. Germany, as one of the countries most heavily dependent on Russian gas, is also one of the ones most alarmed about the decline in supplies, prompting it last month to trigger phase 2 of its 3-stage emergency gas plan. Around half of households in Germany rely on gas for their heating. Some 13% of electricity is derived from the fossil fuel, and gas accounts for a third of industry's energy needs in Europe's largest economy. In recent years, half of that gas has come from Russia. Russia has been cutting flows through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline to Germany, with it now operating at less than a fifth of its normal capacity. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in his daily video briefing, accuses Russia again of deliberately cutting supplies of natural gas to impose a price terror against Europe and call for more sanctions on Moscow. Russia's Gazprom has blamed its latest reduction on needing to halt operations of a turbine. EU Energy Chief Kadri Simpson has dismissed the reason, calling the move politically motivated.